The Price of Vengeance. Subscribe now, hit that like button, and share this story. Your support helps us bring more thrilling tales to more people. He humiliated her on their wedding night, turning their vows into a poisoned chalice. But when the shocking truth comes to light, will it be possible to turn back? Watch now and discover this story with an impactful twist. Interactive question. Comment down below. If you were in her shoes, could you ever forgive the person who betrayed you so deeply? Let me know what you think. The rain streamed down the tall windows of the mansion, drawing irregular lines on the glass, as if the sky itself was mourning something Eleanor still couldn't name. The fireplace cast soft, golden shadows on the classic furniture, but the warmth of the room didn't reach her. Her light blue silk dress rested against her skin like a delicate embrace, and her eyes held a naive, dreamy sparkle. She held a book open in her lap, but she couldn't focus on the words. Her mind was dancing with recent memories, fleeting glances, hands that brushed hers intentionally, and smiles laden with silent promises. Dominic Rossi. The name echoed in her head like a spell. The man who had stormed into her life like a gust of destiny, changing everything, painting the world with colors she never knew existed. Eleanor always believed in love. The sublime love from the romances she read, hidden among the marble hallways of the Vasconcellos family home. She grew up hearing that one day she would find someone who would love her with unwavering devotion, someone who would protect her from everything. And when Dominic appeared, he seemed to be exactly that. A dream come true. He arrived at a delicate time, when her family's financial problems became unsustainable, when whispers of bankruptcy began to poison the halls of high society parties. But Dominic Rossi, with his imposing presence and a charm that bordered on dangerous, dispelled all worries like a seasoned illusionist. His fortune seemed endless, his gestures were calculatedly generous, and his words carried a sweetness that melted any resistance. Eleanor remembered their first meeting, a charity ball, chandeliers gleaming, the scent of expensive wine floating in the air. She was standing with her parents, trying to appear indifferent to the judging glances around her, when she felt a presence at her side. "You don't seem to be having much fun at this event." His voice was low but firm, filled with an impossible magnetism. She turned, ready to respond with the politeness her mother demanded, but the words got stuck in her throat when she looked at Dominic for the first time. Tall, with broad shoulders, and eyes as dark as unspoken promises. His black suit seemed molded to his body, and the smile that played on his lips was a mix of mystery and provocation. "I like to observe people," she finally replied, feeling small under his intense gaze. "And what do you see when you observe me?" He tilted his head slightly, as if he were genuinely interested. She laughed nervously, looking away. How could she say she saw him as something dangerous, fascinating, but dangerous? That meeting was the first of many. Dominic became a constant presence, always appearing at the most unexpected times, always shrouded in a captivating mystery. He sent flowers without a card, looked at her as if he knew something she didn't, and subtly touched her hand, just enough to leave her breathless. He wrapped her in a web of seduction, built with surgical patience. Eleanor had never been courted that way. No man had ever made her feel so special, so desired. With him, everything felt intense. And then came the gifts. Delicate jewelry, rare books. He said matched her romantic soul, and unexpected trips to places she never dreamed of seeing. But it wasn't about the gifts. It was about how he made her feel, as if she were one of a kind. The night he proposed, it was raining just like today. The sky wept over the city, but inside the luxurious hotel suite where they were dining, everything was warm and intimate. Dominic took her hand in his, his skin warm against hers, and said, "Eleanor, I want you to be my wife." Her heart stopped for an instant. He didn't ask, didn't hesitate. He stated it, as if it were their inevitable destiny. And she said yes, without a doubt, without questioning. Because she loved Dominic Rossi, or at least she believed she did. The ballroom was filled with the gleam of gold and the reflection of hundreds of crystals hanging from the imposing chandeliers. The scent of white roses mixed with the sweet aroma of champagne served in fine glasses. It was the wedding of the year, the event that would send social columnists into a frenzy with passionate descriptions of every perfect detail. Eleanor, dressed in layers of delicate lace and floating tulle, looked like an ethereal mirage under the soft lights of the cathedral. Her translucent veil cascaded over her shoulders, and her eyes shimmered with a mix of nervousness and happiness. Her fingers were intertwined with Dominic's, the newly placed diamond ring shining like a seal of eternity. The flashes of cameras captured every moment, turning them into immortal images. Eleanor smiled for each of them, unable to contain the ecstasy spreading through her chest. She never imagined she could be so happy, that love could take such an overwhelming form. Dominic, by her side, was the picture of perfection. His tailored black suit outlined his strong silhouette, and his dark eyes hid secrets under the shadow of his thick eyelashes. He smiled. He kissed her hand. He gently touched her waist when he whispered something in her ear. But for a second, a fleeting flicker of hesitation passed through his gaze, a tightening of his lips, an imperceptible rigidity in his jaw. No one noticed, except Eleanor. For a tiny instant, an almost imperceptible doubt brushed against her happiness, but she quickly pushed it away. It was just nervousness. Nothing more. The vows were exchanged amid the admiration of high society. Dominic's "I do" was deep, charged with an intensity that made Eleanor shiver. When he kissed her, applause erupted in the church like a vibrant celebration. She surrendered to the touch of his lips, to the warmth of his palm against her bare skin. She was married. Dominic Rossi was her husband. The reception took place in the city's most luxurious ballroom. Orchestral musicians filled the air with soft melodies, while waiters glided among the guests, offering rare wines and carefully selected delicacies. The 5-tier cake, decorated with edible gold details, glowed under the warm lighting. Eleanor floated among the guests, accepting congratulations, feeling enveloped by the euphoria of the night. Her gaze sought out Dominic at every turn, always finding him in the middle of an elegant conversation, amid laughter and handshakes. But there was something about him, a hidden emptiness behind his eyes. He smiled, but when he thought no one was looking, his expression would crumble into an indecipherable mask. Eleanor ignored the unease, refusing to give that strange feeling any space. This was the happiest night of her life, the night that would mark the beginning of a new story, a life with the man she loved. As the room began to empty and the last guests said their goodbyes, she felt the tension in her chest grow. It was time for the wedding night. The room was dimly lit when Eleanor entered, her heart pounding with anticipation. Rose petals were scattered over the white sheets, and the soft scent of vanilla filled the air. The mirror reflected her image, her hair falling in loose waves, her lips a soft red. She waited and waited. Dominic was later than he should have been. When the door finally opened, Eleanor turned with a hesitant smile. But something was wrong. He stood in the doorway, his hands in his jacket pockets, his shoulders tense. His eyes were dark, empty, like an ocean before a storm. "It's late," he said. His voice sounded different. Eleanor frowned, walking slowly toward him. "Yes, but it's our first night together," she said, trying to dispel the strangeness. He looked away, pulling off his jacket with a rough motion and tossing it onto a chair. Then he loosened his tie with restless fingers. "Dominic?" She took a step forward. He raised his hand before she could get closer. A gesture of interruption. An invisible barrier erected between them. Eleanor's smile faltered. "What's wrong?" Her voice came out as a whisper. Dominic ran a hand through his hair, sighing heavily. "You really believed this, didn't you?" Eleanor's heart stumbled in her chest. "Believed what?" He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "The fairy tale. The perfect love. In me." Panic crawled over her skin like ice. I don't understand." Dominic looked up, and for the first time that night, he let her see the truth. "Don't expect anything from me, Eleanor." His voice was hard, cruel. "This marriage was never about love. It was about revenge." The floor disappeared from under her feet. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Dominic took a step forward, and she instinctively backed away. "You don't know, do you?" He tilted his head, watching her as if she were a riddle he was finally about to solve. "You have no idea what your family did to mine." Eleanor shook her head, her eyes wide. "My father, what are you saying?" Dominic laughed again, but there was pain in it. "Your father destroyed my family, Eleanor. He ruined my father's business, crushed everything he built." He leaned in closer. "And do you know what happened next?" She couldn't speak. "My father killed himself." Dominic spat out the words, as if they burned his tongue. "He threw himself from the top floor of our house. My mother found him on the marble floor, his blood spilled like a damn signature of the disgrace your family caused us." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. "No, that couldn't be true. I didn't know." Her voice was just a thread of sound. Dominic's eyes burned with something dark. "It doesn't matter. Now you know." Eleanor felt the first tremor in her hands. But why marry me? Why pretend?" He moved closer until their faces were inches apart. "So your family would feel the same taste of pain." Eleanor backed away, feeling the impact of the words like a sword. "Are you saying this marriage was a lie?" "Yes." He crossed his arms, watching her coldly. "And now it's your turn to suffer." Her breathing became erratic, her chest rising and falling quickly. "Dominic, please." He walked away, picking up his jacket again. "Don't beg. You have no idea what's still to come." And then, without another word, he turned and left, leaving her alone, bittered. The house was silent, but not peaceful. Time seemed suspended within the cold walls of the Rossi mansion, and Eleanor felt the weight of the silence as if invisible hands were squeezing her chest. She was still wearing her wedding dress, now wrinkled, dirty at the edges, a cruel reminder of the farce her ceremony had been. Every thread of lace, every hand-sewn pearl, all symbolized an empty promise. But that wasn't what hurt the most. What tore at her soul was the way Dominic looked at her that night. Without love, without hesitation. As if she were just a pawn in a game whose rules she didn't know. And now, after hours of trying to understand what had happened, one thought pounded inside her like an open wound. Her father. The story Dominic told could be true. How many times had she seen her father argue with partners, close deals without the slightest hint of guilt, saying that in the real world, only the strongest survive. She had never questioned it. She had never seen it as cruel. But now, the bile rose in her throat. Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment, trying to hold back the nausea. She needed to know. She needed to confront Dominic and hear the whole truth. She pushed the fear to the back of her mind and left the room, crossing the dark hallways of the mansion. Her bare feet touched the cold marble, and the night wind blew through the half-open windows, making the curtains sway like specters. Dominic was in the office as she expected. The door was ajar, and she saw him before she entered. He was standing near the window, holding a glass of whiskey between his fingers, but he didn't seem to be drinking. He was just swirling the amber liquid, his eyes fixed on the darkness outside. His jaw was tense, his shoulders rigid. Eleanor noticed, for the first time, that he wasn't at peace either. That didn't stop her from speaking. "I want to know the truth." Dominic didn't turn around. "The truth has already been told. I want to hear it all." She walked into the office, closing the door behind her. "I want to know what my father did. I want to know what you lost." This time he turned. His gaze was cold, but there was something else. Something he was trying to hide. "He destroyed my family." His voice was low, devoid of emotion. "He crushed my father's business, spread lies, turned him into a pariah in the corporate world. He couldn't take it." He didn't need to say more. Eleanor hugged her own arms, feeling the impact of the words. "I didn't know. It doesn't matter." Dominic took a sip of the whiskey, as if trying to erase the bitter taste from his mouth. "You carry his name. That's enough." "No." Her voice trembled, but not with fear. With rage. "That's not enough. I am not my father, Dominic. You're punishing me for something I didn't even know existed." He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Do you really think that matters?" She looked at him, feeling the rage grow. "You're so blind with the past that you can't see what you're doing." Dominic slammed the glass on the table, the sound echoing in the office. "What am I doing?" He walked toward her slowly, his presence overwhelming, his dark eyes fixed on hers. "I'm giving you a taste of what my family felt." Eleanor lifted her chin. "And does that make you feel better?" He stopped. It was a minimal instant, but she won't wait. The hesitation, the emptiness in his gaze, the conflict. Dominic wanted to hate her, but some part of him couldn't anymore. He looked away, taking a deep breath, as if trying to regain control. "You're not leaving, Eleanor." Her heart stopped for a second. "What?" He turned back to the window. "You're my wife now, and you will remain my wife." Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. "You want to trap me here?" Dominic didn't answer right away. "I want you to know what it's like to lose everything." She moved closer, forcing him to look at her. "And after that?" She whispered. "After I suffer enough, what happens? Do you discard me? Do you throw me out?" Dominic clenched his jaw, but didn't answer. And in that moment, Eleanor knew. He hadn't thought that far ahead. Because, deep down, he no longer knew what he wanted. And if he didn't know, then she did. She wouldn't stay there. She wouldn't agree to be just an instrument of his pain. And now, for the first time, Eleanor was absolutely sure. She needed to run away and never look back. The days that followed were a labyrinth of silence and shadows. Eleanor woke up every morning feeling the weight of a reality she refused to accept. The marriage, the vows exchanged in front of hundreds of witnesses, the promises that seemed eternal, were nothing more than a cruel trap. A sentence pronounced without her having a chance to defend herself. Dominic didn't touch her. He didn't treat her with violence, but not with affection either. He was a ghost in his own house, a man who moved like a king in a gloomy castle, wearing a cold gaze that stripped her of any illusion. But sometimes, in the moments when she thought no one was watching, Eleanor felt the weight of his eyes on her. It was a gaze she couldn't name. One night, as she walked alone in the huge garden, wrapped in a thin coat that didn't protect her from the cold night breeze, she felt his presence before she even saw him. Her body tensed, but she didn't turn. She continued to look at the sky, at the stars that seemed as unreachable as her past life. "You're going to catch a cold." His voice cut through the silence. Eleanor closed her eyes for a brief moment. The rough tone, the contained intonation, as if he himself didn't understand why he cared enough to warn her. "I prefer the cold," she simply replied. She expected him to leave, but Dominic didn't move. She knew he was watching her. Not in the cruel, calculated way of the wedding night, but with something different. Something that perhaps Dominic himself couldn't name. An invisible conflict. Eleanor tightened the coat around her body, and then, for a reason she didn't understand, she started walking again, feeling his presence follow her from a distance. The next morning, Eleanor came down for breakfast and found Dominic already sitting at the head of the table, the newspaper folded next to his cup of black coffee. He seemed calm, but she knew that mask now. The meticulous control of his expressions, the impeccable posture that didn't betray emotions. Ignoring the inevitable tension, she sat on the other side of the table, pouring herself some tea. The silence between them was a minefield, but at some point, Dominic's eyes lifted from the newspaper page. It was a brief look, but it didn't go unnoticed. Eleanor didn't understand it at the time, but she felt it. He was studying her, not like a man who hates, but like someone who observes something that is escaping his own control. And then, in a subtle gesture, something he would probably deny to his death. Dominic looked down at the ring on his own finger, as if the simple fact that the ring was there made him uneasy. And that made her wonder. He hated her, yes. But was that all? Interactive question. Do you think Dominic is starting to fall for Eleanor? What will happen now that she knows his secret and sees his moments of weakness? Dominic couldn't stand to see her cry. He realized that too late. In the first week, when he found her on the terrace, her knees bent against her chest and her eyes full of tears, he felt a strange discomfort in his chest. This was what he wanted, wasn't it? For her to suffer, to feel on her own skin the destruction her father had caused. So why the discomfort? He should have felt satisfied, but all he felt was a tight knot in his throat. He left before she noticed his presence. But the next day, he discreetly ordered the garden to be remodeled. The flowers she preferred were planted, and the stained glass windows in the main living room, the ones that let in the soft morning sun, were restored. And when Eleanor noticed the changes and wondered if it was Dominic's doing, he pretended not to hear, because he didn't know how to explain what he was doing, because he didn't want to explain it. The days passed, and Dominic became more and more attentive to Eleanor's every move. She didn't confront him as she had before. She didn't ask for explanations. She just existed around him, a presence that destabilized him effortlessly. One night, when he came home late, he found her asleep on the library sofa. The book she was reading was still in her fingers, her breathing rhythmic, her hair spread over the upholstery. Dominic should have left her there. But instead, before he could realize his own impulse, he bent down and took her in his arms. She didn't wake up. She didn't see him hesitate at the bedroom door before laying her on the bed. She didn't feel his eyes linger on her face, as if he were looking for something that would prevent him from carrying out his own revenge. Dominic didn't touch her more than necessary, but when he left the room and closed the door behind him, he realized that something inside him was crumbling. The whiskey bottle was almost empty. Dominic watched the amber liquid swirl in the glass, feeling the warmth of the drink burn in his throat like a deserved punishment. The night outside was dense, suffocating, charged with a humidity that made the wind feel heavier. The mansion was plunged into silence, interrupted only by the occasional sound of ice hitting the glass when he swirled it between his fingers. He hated this feeling, this damned weight in his chest, this growing unease as if something were corroding his very essence. It shouldn't be like this. He should feel satisfied, triumphant. Eleanor was here, trapped by him, condemned to every day and every night of the torment he had designed. So why did he feel like he was the one being tortured? Dominic ran a hand through his hair, his knuckles white from how tightly he held the glass. He felt suffocated, as if the walls of his own empire, which he had built, were closing in on him. He got up abruptly, the sound of the chair scraping against the floor echoing in the office. The drink wasn't helping. The silence of the house was unbearable, and he knew exactly where his thoughts would lead him. To her. always to her. His steps were heavy as he crossed the hallways. He walked without a clear destination, or maybe he just refused to admit that he already knew where he was going. The whiskey was hot in his veins, mixed with the frustration that had been building inside him for days, weeks, months. He hadn't seen Eleanor since breakfast, when she hadn't even looked up at him. Something in him wanted her to look at him. He wanted to see those clear eyes shine again, even if it was with rage, with contempt. But she was learning to close herself off, to hide from him. Dominic hated that. Or maybe he hated the fact that he missed the woman he had sworn to destroy. When he reached the library, the half-open door was enough for him to know she was there. Eleanor was sitting on the sofa, her knees bent against her chest, lost in a book with a distant expression. The soft light of the lamps gilded her skin, and her loose hair framed her face with an almost painful softness. He didn't want to desire that. He didn't want to desire her. But Dominic was already beyond any control. Without realizing it, he entered and closed the door behind him with a soft click. Eleanor looked up, and something lit up inside her. Dominic couldn't say what it was. Maybe surprise. Maybe something more. But he couldn't think anymore. The frustration, the guilt, the desire. Everything converged in a single instant as he moved toward her, took the book from her hands, and tossed it onto the sofa without a care. Eleanor opened her mouth to protest, but Dominic didn't give her room for words. He kissed her. It was a brutal kiss, without permission, without logic. A clash of repressed emotions, a meeting of mouths that should have repelled each other, but which sought each other with hunger, with a desperation he couldn't name. Her fingers touched his chest, as if trying to push him away, but soon they clenched his jacket. And then she yielded. The kiss deepened, and Dominic felt his own control slip through his fingers. The war he had been fighting against himself crumbled. The rage gave way to desire. The desire gave way to something much more dangerous. Without thinking, he took her in his arms, lifting her from the sofa. Eleanor gasped against his mouth, but she didn't resist. She didn't resist. And for the first time since everything began, Dominic allowed himself to forget. To forget the hate. To forget the revenge. That night, he forgot even himself. The sheets were warm against her skin when Eleanor opened her eyes. The room was still in darkness, but the warmth beside her was proof that the night had been real. Her body was exhausted, satiated. Her mind numb. Dominic? She turned slowly, her heart slowing as she saw him there, his back to her, one arm bent under his head, his breathing slow and deep. He hadn't left. That meant something, didn't it? Eleanor felt a smile rise to her lips involuntarily. In that instant, she allowed herself to believe. Maybe everything was changing. Morning came with a timid light filtering through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the room. The warmth of the sheets was still present around Eleanor. Dominic's scent mixed with hers and ingrained in the fabric. She moved slowly, feeling a sweet fatigue run through her body. The weight of the night before was still on her skin, in every touch, in every shared sigh between them. Dominic desired her. It wasn't an act of revenge. It wasn't coldness. He touched her with need, as if he was giving in to something he had tried to deny for a long time. And now, for a brief, foolish moment, Eleanor allowed herself to believe. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Maybe, finally, Dominic had let his guard down. She opened her eyes slowly, turning to the side where he slept, but she found only emptiness. The space beside her was cold. Reality fell on Eleanor like a bucket of ice water. He didn't stay. She sat up in bed, her fingers clenching the sheets as she tried to stifle the oppressive feeling that something was wrong. Dominic could be in the house. Maybe he had just gone downstairs before her. Maybe. Before her mind could create more excuses, the bedroom door opened. Dominic entered. But he was no longer the same man who had held her in his arms the night before. His suit was perfectly aligned, his posture rigid, his eyes empty like an impenetrable wall. As if nothing had happened. As if the night they shared was just another mistake to be erased. Eleanor felt her entire body tense up. He didn't even look at her as he crossed the room and picked up a watch from the dresser. "Good morning," she ventured, her voice still laden with the remnants of sleep. Dominic adjusted the watch on his wrist without responding. "Dominic?" She slid her feet out of bed, but he was already turning his back on her. "No need to prolong this," he said dryly. The coldness in his voice made something inside her break. "Prolong what?" He sighed, as if he were dealing with an inconvenience. "This?" He made a vague gesture with his hand. "Don't mistake a momentary weakness for something that has meaning." The pain was immediate. Eleanor blinked, trying to process his words. "Momentary weakness?" Dominic clenched his fists, but maintained his cold expression. "You shouldn't expect anything more from this." She felt as if she had been slapped in the face. The humiliation rose hot in her throat, burning away every piece of the naive hope that still remained inside her. "So this is it? You slept with me and now you want to pretend it didn't happen?" He finally looked at her. "Yes!" The blow was direct. Eleanor didn't blink, didn't back down. She just felt the weight of everything fall on her shoulders, the way he looked at her, as if he didn't care, as if it didn't mean anything. Maybe it really didn't. She felt a bitter laugh rise inside her. How many times had Dominic rejected her? How many times had he hurt her? And still, she believed. She wanted to believe. But not anymore. If he didn't want to love her, then she wouldn't let him destroy her. She took a deep breath and got out of bed, without rushing. Her movements were controlled, her face an impenetrable mask. "You're right, Dominic." His eyes narrowed, as if something was wrong. "What?" She gave an ironic smile, without a trace of sweetness. "I was an idiot for thinking you could change." The muscles in his jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Eleanor took the robe that was on the chair and put it on. "You want me to stay here? Trapped in this game, in this loveless marriage. But I'm tired of playing alone." Her voice didn't tremble. For the first time since everything began, she felt in control. Dominic took a step toward her. "What does that mean?" Eleanor held his gaze, letting him see something he had never seen before. Indifference. "It means that for the first time, I am choosing myself." And then, without waiting for a reply, she walked past him and out of the room. This time, without looking back. But deep down, Eleanor already knew. She wouldn't be staying there for much longer. She was going to leave, and there was nothing Dominic could do to stop it. The house felt different that night. Eleanor couldn't say exactly what had changed, but she felt it in the air. Maybe it was the silence, deeper than usual. Maybe it was Dominic's look that morning, when he watched her without saying anything, as if he had a premonition. Or maybe it was just because, for the first time, she knew this would be her last night there. As she carefully folded some clothes into a small suitcase, her mind was distant. There had been no more arguments between her and Dominic since their last conversation in the bedroom. No confrontation, no hateful outbursts, no revenge. He simply began to ignore her, and in some ways, that hurt more. But Eleanor no longer allowed herself to think about the pain. She had already made her decision. Tomorrow, before the sun rose, she would leave. Her mother had managed to help her in secret, and a car would be waiting for her on the nearby road, out of reach of the Rossi mansion's security. It would be her only chance, and she wouldn't waste it. If she looked back, she might hesitate. If she thought of Dominic, she might break. So this time, there would be no goodbyes. She would simply disappear, and he would never find her again. Dominic didn't sleep that night. He felt it. From the moment he saw Eleanor that morning, from the instant he noticed something different in her gaze, an uncomfortable premonition grew inside him. She was distant, silent, and that bothered him more than it should. Throughout the day, he tried to ignore the feeling, to convince himself that it didn't matter. But now, in the middle of the night, as he walked through the dark hallways of the mansion, something inside him was screaming. It was an irrational fear, an insistent voice that he wanted to stifle, but that wouldn't go away. When he stopped in front of Eleanor's bedroom door, he couldn't say what made him knock. He waited a second. 2. No response. His chest tightened in a strange way. He turned the doorknob. The door opened. The room was empty. For a moment, everything froze. Then, he saw it. The bed was made, unlike other nights. The drawers were ajar. Some clothes were missing. The dresser, once full of perfumes and jewelry, was now almost empty. And then, like a punch to the stomach, reality hit him. Eleanor was gone. His blood ran cold. He spun on his heels and left the room, his hurried steps echoing on the cold marble. Eleanor? The sound of his own voice filled the empty hallways, but there was no answer. His instincts went on high alert. He ran down the stairs, 2 steps at a time, crossed the main hall, and opened the front door. The cold wind of dawn blew against his face. But no one was there. Eleanor was gone. The house, which had once felt suffocating, now felt empty. And then he realized. He never imagined she would actually leave him. He never believed she would find the strength to go. But she left. And for the first time, Dominic felt the true taste of loss. The dark road stretched out in front of the car, and Eleanor kept her eyes fixed on the horizon. The city was left behind, and with it, everything she lived by his side, with Dominic. She didn't look back. She couldn't. If she looked back, she might hesitate. If she hesitated, she might not be able to move forward, but a part of her knew. She knew that somewhere, at that very moment, Dominic finally understood what it meant to lose someone forever. And that, by itself, was the greatest revenge she could have had. Time passed, but Dominic's obsession didn't. The months that followed were a silent hell, a purgatory where he drowned in his own guilt, in his own rage. He tried to convince himself that he didn't need her, that Eleanor was just an uncomfortable memory, a mistake he should erase. But it was a lie. The silence of the house without her was unbearable. The mornings were empty, the coffees lonely, the bed cold. Dominic saw her in every corner, in the small details he had ignored before. Her perfume still lingered on the sheets. The teacup she always used, forgotten in the cabinet. The books she read, scattered in the library, as if she would return at any moment and pick them up. But she wouldn't come back, and that consumed him. He tried to forget her in the only way he knew how, by working obsessively, burying himself in contracts, numbers, endless meetings. But no victory in the business world could fill the void that Eleanor had left. He needed to find her. And when he finally discovered where she was, the truth hit him like a brutal blow. The car drove along the winding road that led to the small town in the countryside. The place was simple, quiet, so far removed from the life Eleanor used to live that it was hard to believe she was really there. But she was. Dominic got out of the car, his shoes sinking slightly into the wet earth. The wind blew, carrying the scent of fresh grass and burning wood, a striking contrast to the urban coldness he knew so well. He didn't know what he would say when he saw her. He didn't know what he expected to find. But when he finally saw her, everything around him disappeared. Eleanor was there, sitting on a wooden bench in the shade of a tree. Her loose hair moved in the breeze, and her light dress molded softly to her body. But it was what Dominic saw next that made him freeze. The rounded belly, the obvious curve under the light fabric. She was pregnant. The ground seemed to disappear from under his feet. His heart stopped for a second, only to start again in a chaotic, uncontrolled rhythm. It was his. The baby was his. Eleanor hadn't seen him yet. She held a book on her lap, absorbed in her reading, one hand resting unconsciously on her belly, in an instinctive gesture of protection. Dominic couldn't breathe. The rage, the guilt, the despair, everything mixed inside him in a devastating storm. He thought he had lost Eleanor, but now he realized he was about to lose much more. And maybe, this time, there would be nothing he could do to stop it. Dominic didn't know how long he stood there, trapped between disbelief and absolute despair. The world spun around him, but all he could see was Eleanor, her hand resting on her rounded belly, her lips slightly pursed in concentration as she read, oblivious to the hurricane approaching. She was different. There was something in her gaze when she finally looked up and saw him. Shock came first. Her eyes widened, her lips parted in a silent gasp, and the color drained from her face. Then, immediately, her expression closed off. Eleanor stood up slowly, one hand instinctively protecting her belly, as if her own body already knew that Dominic was a danger. His chest tightened at the realization. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was cold, but he felt the tension in every word. Dominic opened his mouth, but no answer came out. There were so many things he needed to say, but none of them seemed enough. So he just looked at her belly. "You're pregnant." The phrase came out hoarse, broken, as if he himself still couldn't believe what he was seeing. "It's none of your business." The blow was direct. He swallowed, his eyes fixed on her, looking for a crack, any remnant of the Eleanor he knew. But all he found was an impenetrable wall. "It's mine, isn't it?" Dominic's voice came out firmer now, charged with something he couldn't name. Eleanor hesitated for an instant. It was a short moment, imperceptible to anyone else, but not to him. Dominic had always known how to read her, and in that fraction of a second, he had his answer. It was his. She tried to walk away, but he held her by the wrist before she could flee. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you didn't deserve to know." The words were sharp as blades. Dominic felt the weight of her contempt like a direct punch to the stomach. He could fight many things. He could face any enemy, any threat. But Eleanor's rejection? That was something he wasn't prepared for. "Eleanor, get out, Dominic." She pulled her arm, freeing herself from his touch, and then she turned around. Dominic's world crumbled in that moment. He had lost her, and for the first time in his life he realized he was willing to do anything to get her back. Interactive question. Do you think Dominic will be able to win Eleanor back after everything he did? What would you do in his place? Tell me in the comments. Dominic tried. He tried in every possible way. He appeared in town, went to the house where Eleanor was staying, waited for her outside. But every time he tried to approach, he was met in the same way. Closed doors, looks of contempt, silences that said much more than words. "I don't want to see you, Dominic. There is nothing left between us." He heard it all. And no matter how much it hurt, he didn't give up. Because he knew that words would not be enough. He knew he needed more. And then, on a night when fate seemed determined to teach him a cruel lesson, the time came to prove his love. Eleanor was walking home alone. The cold night wind blew against her face, and she tightened her coat around her body. trying to ignore the unsettling feeling that ran down her spine. Since she had run away from Dominic, she had learned to trust her instincts. And now, something inside her was screaming that she was being watched. She sharpened her gaze, quickened her pace, and then she saw them. 3 men emerged from the darkness. Eleanor's heart raced. "Miss Vasconcelos," one of them muttered, and the way he said her last name made her blood run cold. She backed away, but the men quickly surrounded her. "Don't be afraid. We just want to talk." But Eleanor knew it was a lie. Panic took over her body. Her breathing became short, and all she could think about was the baby. She couldn't let anything happen to him. She tried to run, but was grabbed by the arm. Her scream echoed in the darkness, and then, like an avenging angel emerging from the shadows, Dominic appeared. The world seemed to stop for a moment. The men turned, surprised. Eleanor held her breath. Dominic's eyes were black with fury. "Let her go." His voice was deathly calm. But no one obeyed. And then it all happened too fast. Dominic attacked first. The fury accumulated over the last few months exploded in precise blows. He knocked one of the men down with a hard punch, then turned and kicked the second, who stumbled back. Eleanor tried to get away, but there was still a third man there, and he was armed. The glint of the gun was the last thing Dominic saw before he lunged in front of her. The shot rang out. The impact threw him backward. Eleanor screamed, and then Dominic fell. Into her arms. The pain was unbearable. But even so, Dominic raised his hand and touched her face softly. "I always loved you, from the very first day." And then his eyes closed. The sound of sirens cut through the night. Eleanor was kneeling on the asphalt, holding Dominic in her arms, while his blood spread over the fabric of her blouse and stained her hands. The metallic smell permeated the air, mixed with the scent of flowers swaying in the cold breeze. "Stay with me." Her voice was a desperate whisper. Dominic was pale, his breathing ragged, growing weaker and weaker. But his gaze, still clouded by pain, didn't leave her. I always loved you." Then he gave in. His body went limp against hers, and for an instant the world stood still. Fear tore at Eleanor from the inside, a primal terror that made her scream his name, as if her voice could bring him back. The red and blue lights of the paramedics lit up the street. Voices were shouting orders all around, but Eleanor barely registered it. All she could feel was Dominic, motionless, too fragile for such a strong man. He couldn't leave her. He couldn't leave them. The hospital was a maze of white walls and cold lights. Eleanor sat in the waiting room, her heart compressed in her chest. Her dress was stained with blood, her hands trembling, and her eyes fixed on an invisible spot in front of her. No one was telling her anything. Doctors ran back and forth. Nurses whispered to each other. And all she could do was wait. Minutes turned into hours. Every second without an answer was torture. Eleanor ran her hands over her belly, trying to control her breathing. Dominic fought for her. He put himself between her and a bullet without hesitation. And in that moment, all the certainties she had tried to hold on to for the past few months crumbled. She never stopped loving him. Never. The fear of loss transformed everything into something simple and clear. She didn't care about the past. She didn't care about the lies or the pain. All she wanted was Dominic. What if he died? Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut. No, she couldn't think about that. "Mrs. Rossi?" The nurse's voice made her heart jump in her chest. Eleanor got up so fast she almost lost her balance. "How is he?" "He's stable, but still in critical condition." The relief was immediate but fleeting. Stable, but critical. "Can I see him?" The woman hesitated. "He's still in a coma. Please." The nurse took her side but nodded. "Come with me." The room was cold, lit only by the heart monitor, that blinked at a slow, constant rhythm. Dominic was lying in the bed, pale, the cables from the machines connected to his body contrasting with his tanned skin. Eleanor stopped at the door, feeling a knot form in her throat. He looked vulnerable. Dominic had never been vulnerable. His chest rose and fell at an almost imperceptible rate, as if his body were fighting to stay there. And then, without a doubt, Eleanor walked over to him. She took Dominic's hand, his cold fingers against hers, and she broke down. The tears fell without her being able to hold them back. "Please come back to me," her voice broke at the end. The sobs came in waves, tearing her from the inside. "I love you." It was the first time she had said those words out loud. "I tried to deny it. I tried to forget you, but I never could." She pressed her forehead against his hand. "I love you, Dominic. Don't leave me." The silence was overwhelming. The only sound was the beat of the monitor, a cruel reminder that he was still there, but so far away at the same time. And then, his fingers moved. Eleanor froze. Her heart hammered when she felt his hand squeeze hers, weakly, but real. Her eyes widened. "Dominic?" His breathing changed. His chest rose more deeply. His eyelids trembled. And then, slowly, his eyes opened. First confused. Then, they found hers. And everything in the world disappeared. Dominic's voice came out hoarse, broken. "Do you still love me, despite everything I did to you?" Eleanor held her breath. He heard. Every word. A tear ran down her face, but this time, it was different. She smiled, a small, trembling, but true smile. "I want that future too." Dominic closed his eyes for a second, as if he was absorbing that. And when he opened them again, there was something there she had never seen before. Peace? Eleanor leaned in and hugged him carefully. She didn't know what the future held for them, but for the first time, she was sure they would face it together. Time passed, carrying away the deepest scars, but leaving the memories etched as permanent marks on the skin and soul. Dominic's recovery was slow, a process full of pain, sleepless nights, and bitter reflections. He was never a patient man, never knew how to deal with fragility, much less his own. But this time, he wasn't alone. Eleanor was there every moment, holding his hand when the pain was unbearable, reading to him when the silence became too heavy. In the first few days, he could barely speak, every word a struggle against the body that was still recovering from the gunshot. But her gaze, the way her fingers intertwined with his whenever despair threatened to take over, was what kept him anchored to reality. She never gave up. And Dominic realized that, for the first time in his life, he didn't want to give up either. Every day, Eleanor became more than just the woman he had sworn to love and destroy at the same time. She was his redemption, his promise of a future he never dared to dream of. And then, months later, that future finally began to take shape. The house in the countryside was different from any place Dominic had ever lived. There were no imposing chandeliers from the mansions he grew up in, nor the cold, impersonal rooms he used to inhabit. Here, everything felt alive. The windows were wide, allowing the sunlight to invade every corner. The furniture was wooden, sturdy and simple, full of history. And the sound of nature, the rustling of the trees, the singing of the birds at dawn, was the only background music. Eleanor was the one who chose this place. And Dominic was the one who, for the first time, felt that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He went down the stairs slowly, still feeling the weight of recovery in his muscles, but without the sharp pain that once dominated him. When he reached the living room, he found Eleanor on the porch, a cup of tea in her hands, her eyes lost on the horizon. She was beautiful. The sunset light dyed her hair golden, and the light dress enhanced the soft curve of her belly. Dominic felt his chest tighten. The baby, their son. It still seemed surreal to think about it. He never imagined being a father. He always thought that carrying his own name was too great a responsibility, a burden he wouldn't wish on anyone else. But now everything was different, because the baby was a fruit of them. And for the first time, Dominic wanted to be a man worthy of that family. He approached slowly, wrapping his arms around Eleanor from behind, feeling her body fit with his as if they were made for each other. She smiled, leaning against him. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft. Dominic nodded, resting one of his hands on her belly. "I'm okay." The silence that followed was comfortable, as if everything they needed to say was already in the air. Then, he turned her to face him, taking her hand in his. Eleanor looked at him, curious, but Dominic didn't hesitate. "I made many promises before," he began, his voice filled with gravity. "Some I should never have made. Others I never knew how to keep." She intertwined her fingers with his, waiting for him to continue. But this time, Dominic brought her hand to his lips, placing a soft kiss on her skin. "I promise to love you as you deserve." Eleanor's eyes shone. "Forever?" Dominic smiled, that true, rare smile he only had when he was with her. "Forever." Then, under the sunset that painted the sky with warm colors, he kissed her. And finally, they were ready for the future. Together. If you loved this story, remember to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us create more amazing content for you.